Welcome back to the Kudlow Report. I'm Larry Kudlow. At the top of this half hour, from one showdown to another, May 16th, 5 weeks and counting. That's how much time Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner says we have before America reaches debt Armageddon. But would failing to raise the debt limit really have the Armageddon-like effect on the U.S. economy, as the White House claims? What about enforcing some new spending limits instead? Well, let's talk and debate. Here now is Pennsylvania Democratic Congresswoman Allyson. She's vice-ranking member of the House Budget Committee, and Utah Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz, also member of the House Budget Committee. Ms. Schwartz, welcome to the show. Let me begin with you. The White House today, Jay Carney, the White House spokesman, said playing chicken with the economy if there's no debt ceiling increase. Do you agree with that?
Oh, it's really serious. The United States of America has never defaulted on our loans. We've paid them. And we should. This is really taking a great risk with the full faith and credit of the United States. It means that we will not pay our debts. That's a big deal, and it really means our interest rates will go up. We may not be able to borrow, which doesn't mean any of us like it. We do not want to see. We would rather not be in this position. So we have real work to do in terms of bringing our spending and our revenues and really meeting our obligations. And the debt ceiling, though, is not a place to play games. This is really serious business. Ben Bernanke has said it, and he doesn't say these things lightly. We have got to pay our debts, and we should not play around with that debt ceiling vote.
Congressman Chaffetz, what is the Republican conference thinking about now? What is the proposal going to be regarding the debt ceiling, which is going to expire sometime in mid-May? It could wander into July. There are about $80 billion left right now. Jason, what's the Republican position going to be?
Well, look, we got to deal with the debt ceiling. It's very serious. There's some of us that think that the national debt is one of the serious impediments to the growth of this economy and one of the most serious threats to our economy. But we can't just rubber stamp and raise the debt ceiling time and time and time again. That's why we find ourselves in the problems that we're at. And so unless there's a serious attempt to curb back the spending in this country, because I believe philosophically we are borrowing, spending, and taxing too much in this country, then we're not just going to say, oh, sure, go ahead. Let's just continue with these multi-trillion-dollar deficits. We can't do this anymore.
So specifically, will the GOP call for a 20% of GDP spending limitation? Will the GOP couple that with budget cuts? In other words, is there going to be a concrete plan? A lot of bond market investors are extremely worried.
Well, look, I think what Paul Ryan put forward, and we debated in the Budget Committee last week, and it'll be up on the floor this week, is the pathway to prosperity, which does bring down the spending limits to less than 20% of GDP. The president's plan never goes below 23%. In his tenure has been about 25%. We just can't continue on those trajectories, and we've got to make some systemic changes to actually get back on the pathway to prosperity, because it's all about jobs in the economy. And if you're going to just continue with this out-of-control spending, you're not going to create the economic atmosphere for our economy to thrive.
Ms. Schwartz, you're at $14.3 trillion on the debt, or you will be in a couple of weeks. Many people think it's going to double again in the next 10 years. It just doubled before this. Isn't the debt bomb the real Armageddon, and what will Democrats wish to do about it?
Well, we actually also believe very strongly that we have got to get our budget in line. And that means having everything on the table. I mean, the budget we will debate this week that the Republicans put forward really take a very small part of the budget in one hand in terms of really cutting our spending. And it actually undoes some of our basic obligations to our children and to our seniors. So what we have to do is make sure that we are looking at everything. That includes some of the tax expenditures, the sort of the tax subsidies that we give to the largest corporations. We want to grow this economy. We agree on that. We just have a very different way of doing it. What we want to do is to make investments in the future. That means investing in education, not giving great oil subsidies to the oil and gas industry, but to use those billions of dollars. It's almost $50 billion to invest in the future.
What
so I'm just saying there's a lot on the table. We have to look at everything.
I understand, but what
and
I
actually
don't
get
get
serious
is,
about it.
as the clock ticks, look, the shutdown went to the last second. Now, the debt ceiling is different, because if you go past the last second, it's not that the government shuts down. It's that the United States defaults on the interest expense on the debt. All obligations cease and desist. They cannot be refunded, Ms. Schultz. Is there one thing that Democrats want out of this exercise in the next 3 months?
Well, what we want to do is get serious about the budget. We'd like to have the Republicans not be so rigid in what they are trying to do, but in fact work with us
How can you make an argument that we were so rigid? We just went through this budget exercise. You know what we cut? I got here in my hand a penny. A penny is all they could find out of every federal dollar that's being spent. How can you call it so rigid? The problem is our national debt.
Yeah.
Our national debt went from $8.67 trillion to over $14 trillion, a 60% rise in the 48 months that the Democrats had the House and the Senate. That's why we're in this problem.
You know, Jason, you can really speak in a loud voice, but it doesn't make you right. The fact is
there anything factually inaccurate about that? I think that is just the facts.
What is factually inaccurate is how we got here. And it really helps us to understand that so we know how to get out of it. You can't do tax cuts for the wealthiest 2% of Americans and say it doesn't matter, that it's going to just grow the economy. It doesn't work that way. And you know, we've had 8 years under George Bush where he kept saying, and we actually saw 650,000 jobs lost and an economy that was so in the tank that, in fact, when President Obama came in, we had to take some pretty serious and tough decisions.
I don't see the Democrats having any serious program or a plan to move forward. I think what Paul Ryan has introduced... I can give you one example. When we passed health reform, and it's now law of the land, the independent Congressional Budget Office said that we're going to save $1 trillion and maybe more over in reducing our deficit over 20 years. And you want to repeal that. You want to repeal that. That's going to cost us $1 trillion and cost American seniors a whole lot more money going forward. And that's a real problem.
Jason Chaffetz, let me just ask you a financial question on this, okay? I think a lot of people want spending limitations. You know, we'll see how that plays out. What do you do, Ms. Chaffetz, if the bond market starts selling off as we approach the day of reckoning on the debt ceiling? If long-term interest rates, which are about 3.5% on treasuries, go to 4.5% or 5.5%, if the Chinese start to withdraw, if other foreign lenders start to withdraw, in other words, how much will that influence this congressional debate, the so-called bond market vigilantes?
Well, that is the big threat that we have, is rising interest rates. We got an energy sector where we have, gas approaching $4 and $5 a gallon. At the same time, QE2 and the thrust of money that's put into the marketplace. Look, these are all serious concerns. At the end of the day, I think, as Paul Ryan has aptly pointed out, you have to curb back spending. We have raised discretionary spending in this country by more than 80% in just the last 3 years when you include the stimulus spending. And you look at the unemployment rate.
The stimulus was one-time spending. It is not ongoing spending. It was not a commitment in the long run.
Of billions of dollars.
That's right, and it helped save 3 to 4 million jobs.
It was going to do.
Well, the economy is growing. We are finally seeing, and we've actually seen for the last 6-8 months, we've seen job growth every month. That's a whole lot better than 2 years ago when we were seeing 800,000 jobs lost every month. We're seeing job growth. We're seeing a GDP growth. We're seeing unemployment go down. We're starting to see companies say we are ready to invest. What they're saying to us is we need stability in the government. We need to know that we can do borrowing. We need to actually have some confidence that we're going to have a skilled workforce. We need investment in education. And we need to know that America will be the leaders of the future in innovation
I don't want to
and
invest
infrastructure.
25 cents. 25 cents out of every dollar spent in this country is spent by the federal government.
All right,
that is fundamentally the wrong way to go.
I have to leave it there.
We have a long way to go to reach agreement on this. I'm sorry.
This debate is going to go on. I appreciate you both coming on. House members Allyson Schwartz and Jason Chaffetz, thank you again. We appreciate it. All right, folks, we are live tweeting right now at the Kudlow Report. That is all one word. And coming up, while